Hello, my name is Michelle Chapman, and in this module we're going to be exploring how we experience the world around us. And this is very much going to lay the foundation for our understanding of how we think moment by moment. I'm just going to overlay onto the screen now the slide. And you can see on the right hand side, there's a lot of information on this slide. But if you look on the right hand side, it says external event. Okay, so this is relating to the world outside of us and the things that are happening moment by moment. And you can see that it says vision, hearing, feeling, smelling and tasting. Okay, so it's been estimated that there's somewhere between 2 and 10 million bits of information coming into our nervous system moment by moment. Okay, so if you just think, if I just look around me now at the room that I'm in here, and I can see the decoration, there's some beams on the wall, there's some shading where the light's coming in through the window. So there's lots of data around me, okay, and that's just everything that I can see. So what about, the sounds? I can hear a car outside. What about our other senses? So we've got, things that we can feel, the seat beneath us, any smells or any tastes. So there's this vast amount of data that's coming in, somewhere between 2 and 10 million bits per second. But it's been estimated that we can actually only process around about 134 bits per second. Okay, so just think about the variance of that. This vast amount of data, but we can actually only take in around about 134 bits per second. Okay, so what we actually do is that we filter the external world. And if you can see at the top of the head, it says filters, and it says delete, distort, and generalize. So what that means is that every moment we are just deleting all of this information that's not relevant to our current experience. Okay, so think about if you're sat down, the feeling of the chair beneath you or the feeling of your shoes on your feet. You are unconsciously just deleting this information because it's just not relevant unless you've got particularly uncomfortable shoes, and then you might be consciously aware of it. So all of this information is just being deleted. Okay, and if you think about it, this happens every day to us. Okay, so you might have a conversation with someone, and a few days later you go back and remind them of this conversation. Maybe you asked them to do something and you said, "Oh, remember I asked you to do that thing?" And they say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. You never asked me to do that." And they just didn't hear it. They just completely deleted it from their awareness. So the other thing that we do is that we distort the world around us and we make it things that it's not. Like when you hear something, maybe you hear someone knocking at the door, and then you go to the door and you open the door and there's nobody there. So it didn't actually happen. There was no knock at the door. You probably heard some sound, and then the mind distorted it and made it something that it wasn't. Okay, so that's completely normal, natural. The other thing that the mind does is that we generalize. Okay, so again, a normal, natural process. And generalizing actually helps us to learn. It's like, when you go to a new place for the first time, you don't have to stand there figuring out how to open the door, because the mind just generalizes, this is how doors open. Okay, but generalization is also the basis of all isms. Ageism, racism, sexism. It's when we say one and the many are the same. Okay, so we can't help but generalize. It's part of the natural functioning of the mind. But what we need to do is raise our conscious awareness on where we're generalizing, because, we could be generalizing in a useful way that helps us learn, but we also could be generalizing in a way that's actually quite detrimental to our experience. Okay, so raising our consciousness on this means that we can generalize in a way that's helpful. Okay, so you can see here beneath where it says delete, distort, and generalize, there are a series of filters. It says time, space, matter, and energy, language, memories, decisions, preferences, beliefs and values, and attitude. And what's really important about this is that the way that we filter is the deletion, distortion, and generalizing. However, what we are filtering, what we are actually taking in, is determined by all of those factors. Okay, so just picking a couple of those out. So for example, values. Values are what's most important to us. Okay, not necessarily what we like, but what's most important to us. So we're going to filter the world based on what's important to us. If it's very important to me to be seen in a particular way or perceived in a particular way, then I'm going to filter my external environment based on that value. The things that I believe to be true, then I will filter based on my beliefs. Things like preferences and past experiences. If I had something happen to me in my past which wasn't pleasant, and I'm still kind of not okay with that, I still don't feel resolved with that, that will determine the way that I filter my world now. It's kind of like, if it looks even remotely possible, the thing that I can't bear to happen might happen, I'm like hypersensitive to that. So I'm constantly filtering my current experience based on this. Okay, so this is what's so crucial to understand, that we are not all experiencing the world in the same way. We are all filtering in our completely unique way. Okay, so we're all getting like our own little snapshot of reality, our own version of reality, which is why we say, remember, that our thinking, our reality is not the reality. Okay, so referring back to the slide, it says, okay, so once we have filtered our external environment, what we have is what we call an internal representation. Okay, so the internal representation is our internal representation of this outside world. It's how we hold the outside world in our minds once we've filtered it in our own unique way. Okay, so it's basically what we're thinking. So what we think of our external reality every moment is the way that we have unconsciously filtered it based on our experiences that we've had in the past and so on. So if you look beneath this, it says state, okay? And then there's a two-way arrows going between internal representation and state. So just to kind of simplify this, you could think of internal representation is the way that we think. The state is the way that we feel. So when I have a thought in my mind based on my filtering process, I then feel that thought. Okay, so I feel the impact of whatever I'm thinking moment by moment. But the arrow, because it goes both ways, what we're actually thinking is thoughts on our feelings. So we end up in this cycle. Okay, and this is something, again, that's really common for people, particularly if they're having anxiety, is that if we filter the world based on our perceptions, and then we have thoughts, okay, about how things could be potentially in the future. Okay, so I'm having thoughts about how things could be. Then what I'm doing is I'm feeling the effect of those thoughts. So as I feel the effect of those thoughts, I then start to feel anxious. Okay, and then I'll have other thoughts on the way that I'm feeling, and then we end up in this cycle. I don't know if that resonates in some way. You can see there is state and physiology. Okay, and again, there's a two-way arrow between state and physiology, because we know that, when we're, say for example, we're not feeling great. Okay, so we're not feeling in a particularly good mood, or we're feeling very tired and very low, then we tend to kind of show that in our physiology. It might be that we, kind of a bit asymmetrical. Whereas when we're in a great mood, we're, feeling wide awake and energized, then we hold ourselves completely differently. But actually what's not always so commonly known is that actually that it works both ways. How many people go to the gym after having a really bad day at work and then start to feel better? And that's a really common experience. And the reason people start to feel better is because they're physiologically doing different things. So they are holding themselves upright, they're working out, they're using their muscles, and straight away that has an impact on our state. So we already know, and by the way, I'm not saying that the solution to a bad day is just to hold our body differently, But actually, that is a way that we can start to feel differently about ourselves, that we can start to feel better about ourselves if we just hold ourselves upright. Okay, so if you look at the bottom left-hand side, it says what you focus on determines your results. So in essence, what we're saying is that the way that we think affects the way that we feel, which affects our physiology and our behaviour, which in turn affects the results that we get. Now, the question would be, if the filtering that we do completely unconsciously. Okay, so we are not consciously aware of the filtering process that we're doing that's determining the way that we think. So what we're going to start looking at is how we can become more conscious, how we can become more consciously aware of the way that we're filtering, and how that in turn affects the results that we're getting in our lives.